Love is all is love is all love is all is love is all.
Hello and welcome to Pray Love, hosted by Deb Maybury and Dave Rogers. Good evening, Dave. How's it going?
Fantastic, Deb. Nice to see you.
I know. We had a conversation earlier this afternoon, so I think we're doing some pretty meaningful work today.
All in the wonderful energy of 420.
Go ahead. Please share our land blessing.
We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties, is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Mother Earth, Father Cosmos, all enlightened beings, friends, family, thank you for joining us tonight for a discussion where our intuition will be explored in many multiverses. May we bring alertness, awareness, and compassion in our conversation tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who's turning into Pray Love. We are going to bring our guest into the studio. Hi, Shoshanna.
Hi, good evening.
Hello,
Thank you for
hello.
joining us tonight. And just for the viewers watching tonight, please, if you have any questions, put it on in the chat, and we will get Shoshanna to answer some questions for you tonight. So let me just do the formal introduction.
First, though, I just want to say thank you for that prayer. And the land that I live on is the indigenous land of the Hopi and Mountain Ute and Navajo Nation here in Denver. So thank you. I just wanted to say that first.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Shoshanna French's goal is to cultivate wildly successful leaders through the practical power of intuition. She's got my mind going in another place. I think you're putting me into a session. I'm getting the woo. As the founder of Simple Spirit, a keynote speaker and coach to NFL leaders, Broadway and television stars, million and billion-dollar business founders, CEOs, and business professionals, Shoshanna French generates unpredictable and profound results for leaders who are looking to develop a deeper connection to their purpose. I love that's a big last word. I love that. And maybe starting out this evening, first of all, thank you so much. I know that you went right from a client and just jumped right in here. So thank you so much for doing that and joining us this evening. But maybe share a little bit about your journey. How does one become a simple spirit, and what is a simple spirit?
Well, the name Simple Spirit came from, I was in a group, like a woman's business group, and we all meditated together, did a transcendental meditation together. And what came up in the meditation was the name Simple Spirit as my business name. So I think that Simple Spirit is about, we make things really complex and complicated, probably. Things are complex, but we make things complicated. That's probably more accurate. And being a simple spirit is just about being present and truthful and recognizing that not everybody, that everybody, while the same, is uniquely different. And so that to me has always been what Simple Spirit's about, which is, honoring and recognizing your unique expression in the field of the oneness that we are. So that's the best way I can say it.
I love it. And how did you get there? Does one go to college or, were you on a path? Were you in the business arena at some point, or were you always on the path?
No, it's so funny. I just wrote, I'm writing a lot these days, and I just wrote a blog post about the story of how I came to kind of study intuition and got on this path. I went to college for English. like literature, specifically minority writers and women's studies and like that. And then following being in college, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I literally had no idea. And so I went and participated in transformational education and did all these programs and read a lot of books. And in the series of all of that, it kind of took what I already had learned in college from meeting all these metaphysical people and kind of formulated, how do you bring metaphysics into the real world? Because I don't know a lot. I know what I know, but what I do know is that the really deep spiritual practices that, I don't know, millennia of spiritual people have talked about, spiritual teachers, was not like, how do you meditate all day? Because that's what monks are called to do. But if you're someone who can't meditate all day long, but you have to live life, then the meditation is the living of life. And so I've always been curious how you bring like ancient wisdom into modern life. And so, that's been my path. And the cool part is that when I started this path when I was 18, and in a really traditional metaphysical way, learned group meditation from women that were 3 times my age. They taught me tarot and kind of all these really traditional ancient stuff, the Thoths and Egyptian things and all this stuff. When I learned all that, I was like so entrenched in it. And then I left it completely and went into kind of this more brain stuff, transformational personal development work, which was like so different than the metaphysics. And then somewhere along the line, I was like, okay, I can't have all these separate parts of me. I have to find a way to mesh them together. And so when I was in that business class in 2005, and the woman in this money group was like, the way to get ahead is to create a business so that you can be, passionately living your life, helping people, but also making money in a way that's like in alignment with who you are. And that business came to me. It was like, oh, I could combine all these things together. I could take the metaphysical stuff that is, like the ancient spiritual practices. Quite a bit of is indigenous, whether it's, the indigenous practice of my lineage is the Celts. And so those indigenous practices or the other indigenous practices that come from all over the world, and also, transformational education, mindset, and, learning how to shift and transform, paradigm shift, all those kind of like modern current stuff, philosophy, right? And like piece it together and then help people. So that's how I ended up where I am now. And that has to be, this is so you're clearing, Deb, that has to be the most worded and beautifully worded answer I've ever given. So thank you for that. That's so you're clearing. I'm like, oh, that was so artful. That's such a different way to say that.
It's resonating with me so deeply because so many of those things that you mention for the average people would be like going out of their comfort zone to dive into even one area. And you've had the journey through like each of them, and then you've woven that together to create a purpose for yourself where you're doing what you love and how you're gifting that to other people for them to find out what their purpose is. So, I mean, I love what you said, because if everybody was doing what they love, I think this world would be in a much better place.
Certainly. And I think you and I talked about it before, maybe, oh gosh, I can't remember because you and I met a few years ago, but one of the conversations you and I had a while ago was my path in this lifetime is the reconciliation between feeling like I don't belong because the way I think is so different, and meeting other people who also think they're different and don't belong, and recognizing, kind of like Brene Brown says, she calls it the wilderness, right? Braving the wilderness, that when you go and brave the wilderness, there's actually people out there. So when you think you're like totally on your own, and then you look around, you're like, nope, there are a whole bunch of other weirdos out here with me. Thank goodness I'm actually not on my own. And, I got guided by all these amazing people. And every time I said yes, there was like the next guide and then the next. And so, that's the thing about intuition, is it is being open to and willing to consider that things are not the way you think they are. Because mostly intuition is outside of like our training to fit in and make it in society. It's outside of childhood trauma. It's outside of beliefs that we learned when we were young. And so to believe your intuition, you really do have to be willing to consider that things aren't the way you think they are. And that's a harder practice. That's the nuanced practice of listening to intuition, which is why I recommend that people meditate. Because if you don't, your monkey mind is awfully loud.
Yeah, I'm just working on I'm starting up a group called Mindful, and it's about that monkey brain being so incredibly full of so much not useless material, but active and not so proactive, pro-positive information. Yeah, I want to get Dave in here for a question, because I have about 5 of them with what you just said, but I know Dave is also percolating.
I would love to hear a little bit of your experience with the Denver energy and what drew you to Denver, and what types of beautiful messages you're getting from Mother Earth, Denver style at this time, at this place.
Well, Mother Earth and I are in a little bit of disagreement right at the moment, because it's spring, but it snowed 5 inches yesterday. And
we're getting it tonight.
Watch me roll my eyes. So I'm ready for spring, and spring in Colorado means snow. So anyway, I've actually lived here. I grew up here, was born in Denver. My dad's family came from like the Nebraska area. My mom's family came from far, in like the eastern side of the United States. And then by way of LA came to Colorado. They loved it. When they retired, they decided this is where they wanted to live. So this is where I have grown up. I've traveled a lot. I love to travel. I love meeting people, but my heart comes back to Colorado, I think probably for a few different reasons. One, obviously the mountains, it's beautiful here. But there is something just very, very solid about the energy in Colorado to me. In particular, it has 4 seasons when it's not snowing in spring, but it really does have all 4 seasons, which I really love. I love that, like it helps reflect for me outwardly the inward cycles of life. I pay a lot of attention to that, like sometimes you got to pause. Sometimes things are percolating. Sometimes everything is like crazy and insane. It's all growing like summer. And then, and then sometimes things don't go the way you expect, like piles of snow when new things are supposed to be growing. So it's good. It's a good reflection. Currently, the messages from Mother Earth that I've been hearing in Colorado is like thankfulness for more moisture. We're just really dry. I don't know if you've ever been to Colorado in the US, but it's really, really dry. We're considered alpine, like we're like high country desert, basically. And so when it's been so dry, we had a really dry winter. When it's getting rain like this, I can literally like hear the earth kind of sucking up all the moisture. So that is the thing that has me not complain as much about the snow in April 20th is, that I know that she needs it, that our land needs it bad, so that our fire season isn't so bad. So those are the kind of the current messages.
Thank you.
I went kind of mega size and not so individual, but hopefully that works.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think what you said about meditation is so critical in our environment. There's so much this analytical brain activity, this monkey brain on what's going on out there. And people I think they're not taking enough time just to be quiet and settle and take an opportunity to look within. I mean, Pray Love came out of a meditation. The logo up, that's displayed there to Dave's left side, that was in a meditation. Yeah. and there have been so many things in my life that have come out of a meditation. What are some interesting things that you've experienced as a result of meditation?
Oh my goodness. So I have been a off and on meditator, or I was for 26 years. And probably for the last 5 years, I've been pretty dedicated to it. But things like meeting my husband, he himself did not come out of a meditation. That would sound weird, but the recognition to be patient and wait for him came out of a meditation. Like I had already gotten the initial kind of intuitive message when I met him, like that's the man you're going to marry. But we'd been friends for 2 years and nothing was happening. And so in a meditation, it was like a very clear image of us together being married and what was possible. So that's like something that came that was interesting. I've met my spirit guides in meditations. I've seen images of places I've never been, and then gone to those places and been like shocked, like, oh, like before I ever saw Ireland in the flesh. I've been twice now. I saw it in meditation when I went to what we call in my spiritual practice a nematon, which is like the spiritual place you go for connecting to your elders and your ancestors. And in my nematon, it was like this top of a hill, cliff and ocean. And the first time I went to the Cliffs of Moher in Ireland, I was like, hey, wait, I've been there in meditation. I've heard messages. I mean, you can name it. I use kind of a form of meditation with clients when I get on the phone with them as a way to get them present and in their body with me anyway. And so there's so many different things have come through in meditation, lots of messages, guidance, and all that kind of thing, but also just, I would say the most profound thing always that comes through with me is like the recognition that I have access to, knowing things that I wouldn't be able to know otherwise. And like that sense of all is well, maybe not all is well out here, but all is well in here, which going back to that over and over again is extremely helpful when the world is the way that it is, can be sometimes.
Right. When you mentioned about guides, like messages, spirits, a lot of people haven't experienced that, or they think they've never received a message. What sort of is there a distinction, a difference between having a sense of something versus actually hearing something, or a really strong feeling kind of sensation? How can people connect with guides or angels or whatnot?
So what I'll say is, just to distinguish it for people listening. So there's intuition and tapping into intuition, which to me is a really practical thing. And then there's connecting to guides, which to me is more of a spiritual practice. And so how people's intuition works is all really different. Like some people, are more emotionally oriented. Some people are more mentally oriented. Some people are more physically oriented. So when I talk about messages that I get from connection to guides, I'm a mind intuitive. So mine's a very mental connection. You can hear it in the way that I speak. And of course, the way that I connect things that seem really spiritual and really practical, like that makes sense that I would do that as a mind intuitive. And then there is hearing, seeing, feeling, and knowing. Those are the 4 ways our body translates. So for me, when I go into meditation, I like guided visual. That's my favorite. Some people like Vipassana and being really quiet. Some people like chanting. Like we're all built a little differently. I like guided visual because I have a pretty serious monkey mind. So being like a story being narrated in my head is a way to just quiet the system so I can focus on one thing. And when I met my guides, they're not people I knew in real life. They're like, I always like to say, to clarify that, like past loved ones coming in and communicating to you is actually very different than when you have a spirit guide. To me, the distinction spirit guide is beings who are here to be of service to you. So, and everybody has at least one, and some people have a lot. Some people have a lot. Like my original teacher, Rosemary, had like 10. And when you were with her, it always felt like you were getting hugged from behind. And it was just because she had so many guides she was working with. So when you get a message from a guide, to me, how it occurs is when I go into meditation, I can see them. Like they occur to me very much in a visual format. I see what they look like. I hear their voice, and their words are really clear and easy to understand. But sometimes their message is a physical object. Like I've had guides give me a crystal before that I then have to come out of meditation and look up in my crystal book because I don't know what that is that they just handed to me. Sometimes they show me an animal, and then I go into my Animal Speaks book and look that up. Like, what's that animal? I don't know what that animal means. And then sometimes they just give me like a whole series of words. So it just depends.
And is that the way it works with clients?
With clients, meaning when they tap into their guides, or when I tap in for
when you're people? Like, because with my experience, I don't know what you call that, sitting with you or holding space with you, you're doing the reading. So you're saying, you talk to me kind of what we want to talk about, or what I'm, curious about at that time, and then it's like you're tapping in. So you're tapping into my guides or your guides?
Both. Okay. With your permission, I talk to your guides, and then I talk to my guides. And it's also my intuition and how my intuition works. So I don't always need guides to communicate to me. What I find is that people are way more comfortable if I say guides are with us, they're going to talk to me, than if I just say like, I'm really intuitive and I can hear all of it. Like I can see all of it. I can hear all of it. I'm tapped into you. I can tell you what I can see and perceive immediately. Sometimes in my experience, it's not like guides talking to me. It's more like they're turning up the volume on what's going on with you, and they're turning up on the volume on what's going on with me, so I can hear it more easily. Because when I sit with someone who I've never met before, I could look at them, whether we're doing a video chat or I'm seeing them in person, and I could make a whole bunch of assumptions about who they are by looking at what's behind you, or looking at what your face looks like, or hearing your voice. But in order to not make any of those assumptions and be a pretty open and clear receiving, I have to turn up the volume of my intuition and turn down the volume on my noise. That's taken, I've been doing this for 26 years, so it's taken a long time to let go of all my junk so I can hear it more easily.
Yeah, that's one reason why I just prefer the phone call, not the video sessions, right?
Yeah.
For both of us, because I want to feel into that too, tap into that energy at the same time. Yeah. Dave?
We have a question. Are you an empath, Shoshanna? That was from Sean.
Yeah, so some people are very empathic. My husband is an empath, meaning that he often feels what other people feel as his own. I would say that I'm a mind empath. So I never knew this, but I can pick up on people's thoughts all the time, like their pattern of thinking. So when I'm with someone who's like, this is impossible, everything's hard, this will never happen, I literally will leave being with them and my brain will be thinking those thoughts. So I have to, now that I know that, I can pay closer attention to it. So it depends how that person who asked that question, how that person defines empath. How I define empath, I say, yes, I am empathic. I can sometimes have a hard time telling the difference between what I'm thinking and what other people are thinking. They occur as the same.
Great.
That's a good question.
What would be, again, I like to ask the general question, what would be one or two or perhaps three guiding principles to invite people to welcome more intuitive messaging and delightful experiences that they can unfold?
One is be in your body. We spend a lot of time either in our head or in emotional reaction to life. So it takes practice to be in our body. But if you can be in your body, and some people say to me, like, I don't understand what that means. What do you mean by being in your body? I just mean being only in your body. So recognizing that you are a body moving through time and space. We don't realize that we're not actually in our body until we injure it or until it's sick. And then we're very present to our body. So that's the first one I would say is ground, to get in the body. The second principle is be curious. So pause, which we don't do, by the way. That's like all people I talk to. Pause, like unplug from our phone, unplug from noise, unplug from technology, and just pause and ask questions. That's like a huge one. There have been all these writers recently that talk about it that I love. Glennon Doyle in her book Untamed called it like taking moments to listen to your inner knowing. She called it that, like my knowing was talking. Everybody's intuition works a little bit differently, but pausing is hugely important. And then the third principle I would say is get curious, because our intuition is led by our curiosity. So whoever's listening to this, given probably the people who listen and love what you guys are doing, might be more spiritually minded people. And so they might already have practices for connecting to their inner knowing or connecting like in meditation or something like that. So the things I said were pretty practical. It's what I would tell practical people. But if you're a spiritual person, I would say spend time each day, not just like stilling the mind, but getting into the body too, like connect to the body. So like go put your feet in the dirt or move your body, exercise like that. The whole thing about taking a pause. If you're a spiritual person who meditates, set an intention before you go into meditation with a question, like a curiosity, as something that you want to come back up out of meditation with sort of like guidance about. And then curiosity, that is something that I find a lot of spiritual people who are seekers have. So that might be a lot of people who listen to this are already seekers. But if you're a person who really likes to know, and like then that way they can relax because now they know what they know, go back into that space of being willing to go into the liminal unknown and be curious, because that in between space is where intuition has the room to communicate.
Lovely.
Goosebumps.
Lovely.
Goosebumps. I had this experience with hearing a voice, a very clear voice. If I had that when I was a kid, I never would have shared that. But now I'm writing, a book about my secret life, my spiritual tapestry. So that's in the works. It's been sitting aside a little bit, but it keeps calling me. And what you said about asking a question before meditation, I'm doing a lot of hypnosis, sort of meditations right now. And I haven't been asking questions beforehand. And I would really love to tap into that one guide that actually spoke to me just as clear as I'm hearing you guys. So thank you for that that tip to really, and I know that I just forget about it when I go into the meditation. So I posted a quote up here. I'm sure you noticed it at some point.
Yeah.
Can you speak to your quote?
Yeah. Trust your intuition, transform your life. So some people that I've talked to think that intuition has to be like some huge, almost like the way we think of like a conversion moment, like, oh, now I know the answers to the universe. But actually, intuition is just a navigation tool. So the micro adjustments, I like to call those micro adjustments, but the micro adjustments we make based on what our intuition is communicating to us can literally transform our whole life. So I can give you the verbiage of that came from talking to one of the people who works for me. And I was sharing with her this moment of micro adjustment. And she was like, oh my God, like that transformed your whole life. And I was like, yeah, that's what happens when you trust your intuition. And so she captured that quote. But I can give lots of different moments, but two of the key ones I think might be interesting for the people who love your show. One would be when I was in college, I walked into a metaphysical bookstore, and prior to that moment, metaphysical bookstores made me really uncomfortable because I was raised in a pretty traditional religious home and had literally in 8th grade gone to like a movie short in our Bible study group that spoke about psychics and crystals and metaphysics and like how evil it was and how it opens you up to bad things. And so I was deeply afraid of a metaphysical bookstore. However, the way this went was my friend said, hey, there's this bookstore downtown. I totally want to take you to it. I think you'd dig it. And so we walk up to the bookstore and it's a metaphysical bookstore. And I was freaked out. But that's what my brain was saying. But my intuition was like, just go check it out. So we walk into the store and this woman came from behind the counter, came to find out her name was Rosemary. And Rosemary said out loud, oh my gosh, there you are. It's so nice to meet you. And I thought it was because my friend Dawn had told her about me. She had had a dream, and in her dream, like what she would call Source came to her and said, you're going to meet a girl who's going to walk in your store and you have to teach her everything you know. And she did. And she was like, I'm the same age now that she was then, 40, I think 44. And like, thank goodness that she listened, right? And that she listened to her intuition and followed and kept looking for me, because she had had that dream like months before and she kept looking for me. And then there I was. And thankfully she listened to say something to me. And thankfully I listened to my intuition instead of my brain, which was like, get out, get out. And then I proceeded to, be trained by all the women who were at this place. It's called Kaleidoscope. There was a whole series of women that were all like metaphysical people who taught me everything they knew. They lent me books, and as long as I returned them undamaged, I could borrow like a library versus a bookstore. And I was a broke college student. So I read Edgar Casey, and I read all these channeled works of Seth, and I read things about like everything you could possibly imagine. That's like all the metaphysical books you should read when you're just learning. They lent them to me. And thank goodness I listened to my intuition. That was a pivotal moment. Had I not done that, then I would not be who I am today. I mean, that's how I learned. I don't know where I would have ended up had I not walked into that store. The other pivotal moment was in 2010. It was 2009. I got a phone call from the Denver Post. It's a newspaper here in Denver. And they said, Santa Claus is sick. And he normally does an eye on sports, like after Christmas. Santa Claus puts this thing out about sports, but the guy that writes that has the flu. Would you be interested in doing it? A psychic eye on sports. And my brain was like, hell no, definitely not. But my intuition was like, like as I felt into it, if I ignored like my racing heart and felt into it, it felt possible and expansive. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I said yes. And they put a psychic eye on sports in the newspaper. I basically answered questions from readers about every sports team in Denver. And we have all 4 major sports teams in Denver, plus, through 2 big, I guess they're called D1 schools or whatever. And I answered all those questions. And I went from doing 8 sessions. My business was 8 sessions a month to 8 sessions a week. I was on television twice. I was on the radio. And if I had listened to my brain, which was a no, then that would have never happened. And for sure, I would not be in the position I'm in now where I'm doing this full time and have been for almost a decade. So that's, literally trust your intuition, transform your life. And the transformation of life sometimes is not a big whoa. Sometimes it's like just a very subtle change, which then changes the whole trajectory of your future, which is what happened in both of those instances. So that's where that quote came from.
I love it. And it's so true. I went to one school versus another for psychotherapy. I was set to do the master's, and then I went to the Transformational Arts College, which I knew academically wouldn't have the same esteem attached to it. And yet I knew as soon as I walked in there, I just felt like I was at home. Just that connection with some people. And that had been something that I ran away from for so long, that knowingness, that intuition, and thinking I was alone and strange and could pick up energies and read things. And, that's why the book In My Secret Life, right? Dave, I noticed, I don't have my glasses. Oh, maybe we're almost at that time. So I'm noticing that long thing, did you read that? Shall we wait or, yeah. Okay, so it's interesting. So
a magical 33-minute moment. Please share a magical moment in a reading or teaching that you or another experienced.
So how Deb and I met each other is through a teacher named Sachen, and him and I met in a really magical way, but that's not what the story's about. We met in a really magical way, and then I went to Vancouver to do a program that he offers, and I loved it so much that I ended up taking his master coaching program. And so I was there on a weekend, and we were doing a puja, which I had never experienced before, and he was having us practice the subtle energies of the masculine and feminine, and which was, I understood it conceptually, but I'd not experienced it in the body. And the person standing in front of me was actually Sechen's brother. So he was standing in front of me, and we were having this, and we were like practicing being open and connecting. And he said, "You're really good with the masculine energy, and you're good with the feminine, except because we did it for each chakra." He was like, in your solar plexus, the feminine energy there, you're not allowing in. And I was like, I don't associate the feminine energy with the third chakra. That's the one about power and will. Why would that be feminine? And he was like, he knew what I do he knew at the time what I did for a living. He thought that was hilarious. He was like, well, where do you think you receive the impetus or the will to step into something? It's from that chakra. And it blew my dang mind. And so I was like, all right, let's do it again. And so we did it again, and we went to the third chakra, and I practiced opening up and being receptive in the third chakra. And all of this like trauma from childhood came back that I had just totally forgotten about, mostly about being hungry and being poor and not knowing where food was coming from. And so being tough was like my way of always being in the masculine and the third chakra, and being willing to be in the feminine was about trusting. And that's what he was saying, but I couldn't hear it. It was like, do you trust the universe or not? And if you trust it, then you're willing to open up and be soft there. I'd never been soft there before. And I mean, it was magical because I have a hard time being a student, if I'm honest. It's really hard for me. I'm much better as a teacher or like observer learner, but I have a harder time like opening myself up. And that was such a like a shift in my point of view about myself, but also my shift in what the divine feminine energy looks like in the body. And I just didn't realize that I was blocking it there and that there was stuff to heal. So all of that feels very healed now. And I'm much more in trust than I've ever been. And that's, I think, expanded my ability to be with people, like not even just in my work, but in general, having more compassion when we get fearful and we clench there and we're like, oh. So I have way more compassion than I used to for people when people are afraid. I just didn't realize that's what I was doing. So that's a magical moment.
Beautiful.
Very
Dave,
nice. Go ahead,
do you have
Deb.
one?
Go ahead.
A teaching magical moment. Well, I just saw Marge. I just want to acknowledge what she's saying. It actually has made me think of a magical moment in teaching with the Transformational Arts College.
Mm-hmm.
And I was teaching a course on sexual abuse. So I'm teaching psychotherapists, and it was all done. We had our classes and everything, and it was all on Zoom. And when it was done, I was saying, okay, bye, thank you, and everything. And nobody was leaving. Like nobody was going out of the Zoom. Everybody was still there. So again, the intuition is like, okay, guys, what's going on? What are you looking for? You're still here. What is it? And they all were like, well, tell us more. We've learned so much. We want to know more. We want more. And I said, well, actually, I have a course that I am teaching. And that's outside of what the school is. And they were all wanting that. And it was so, it's hard to describe. It's such an interesting, magical teaching moment when your students want more. And that T. Harv Eker thing, well, you create it on the spot, Satchan, you create the next course on the spot. And it just came to me exactly what it was that I would teach. And then the next time there was another one that came up to what to teach, just knowingness of what the students were looking for. So that was a magic teaching moment. Dave, do you have a magic teaching moment?
I think so. The one that got triggered was in Cambodia, and we were doing a sacred circle, and the co-facilitator was a lady called Hillary Carter, and Hillary wrote the book, The 1111 Code. And so she was really bringing in the divine feminine, and we had people in a circle, and we were invited to be part of the opening of a Shiva temple that had been closed for many years in restoring it. And so we got in our circle, and we're doing divine feminine chants, divine masculine chants, and really allowing the body to move and to ground with the temple that had just been reopened. And it was just, we really got the Kundalini rising and doing clearings of the chakras. And Hillary was using her beautiful Celtic voice to allow some clearings to go to the chakras. So she was doing some toning. And then as we brought it to a close, she asked me to do a couple of guttural boom, boom, boom. And then she went up and just boom, brought it to a close. And I went boom. And I cracked my head open. And the blood started coming down my forehead. And she goes, perfect close, Dave. And no worry or anything. She just said that we had raised so much energy, we needed to have a bloody letting. And so it was really incredible. And it when it cracked, like the crown cracked, it was a sparkle, and then the blood, it was so warm, and it just came down, and it was truly a miracle. And her reaction was just so beautiful because there wasn't any worry or anything. It was just, wow, nice completion to the healing. So,
yeah. Crazy. It's reminding me of getting knocked off my bicycle a couple of years ago. Yeah, that's a whole other story. Okay, what I want to do, thank you for sharing, Dave. Okay, so I want to post up here. Where is it here? Let's talk about your blueprint and what you're doing now in terms. There we go. In terms of teaching people to find their intuition or evolve their intuition.
Yeah. Well, so I had been doing readings for a really long time, and what I noticed is what would happen is people were putting more trust in me than in themselves, and that felt a little off for me. And then it was like people really started to trust me more than them. So I had people who were repeat customers who were looking to me all the time to like give them answers, and I just was like, there's something about this that is not fulfilling what I want for people, which is like the intention of me being a really well-trained guide and like listener is to help them hear what they haven't been able to hear. And then hopefully in that opening, then they'll be able to now trust their intuition. So I just started asking the question, how could I train people how to use their intuition wherever they are, like however they are? And, this came to me, the intuitive blueprint. I was like, I don't know what that is, because the word, that's how my intuition works. The word came first, the words, but not what it was. So I wrote the words down, and then, just started to get curious, like, well, what kind of questions would you ask in an intuitive blueprint? Like, is it a typing test like the Myers-Briggs? And it took some time, right? And then what came to me was intuition has two parts. And one part of it is the part that everybody talks about, which is what I call your internal translations. It's all the clairs. People talk about that all the time, right? They talk about some people are sighted, they are clairvoyant. Some people know things, they're claircognizant. Some people feel things, they're clairsentient. Some people hear things, they're clairaudient. And so there's lots of amazing writing and teaching about those particular pieces. But the piece that I felt like was missing was people understanding what was it that they were connecting to and how could they connect? Like, what is the mechanics of their intuition? So the intuitive blueprint is a test, takes 5 minutes. It's 36 questions, and it can help anyone understand how the nuts and bolts of your intuition work. So even if you're someone who uses your intuition already, I've had other psychics take the test and they're like, that's so interesting. I would not have thought that I was a knower, but yeah, that makes sense when I do that one thing that is knowing. It's not the thing I use with clients. But this is the test that I give to entrepreneurs, is the test that I give to executives. It's the test I give to all the people I work with and ask them to take it first. So then we have a basis, like a place to start. This is how your intuition works. And now it's being able to recognize it and recognize that you're using it already. You were born with this ability, and now we just have to remind you how it works and sort of unravel all the stuff that had you stop listening to it in the first place. Mm-hmm. So that's what the intuitive blueprint test is.
Sounds awesome.
Thank you. I posted it there on Facebook as well, and it's very, very simple. It doesn't take much time. Do people change over time? Because yes. I think it was actually just between us in our conversation, and you said, so what would you say I am now?
I would say when I met you, for sure, heart intuitive. I felt like that was your primary orientation, but I feel like you're more mind intuitive, body intuitive now.
Okay. So it's interesting because it had switched, and I thought, I think maybe it's because, I was thinking from the psychotherapist perspective, answering a little bit more like that. And I wasn't sure, and I didn't know if it's more fluid, like the path of that. Certainly we evolve over time, but
definitely
intuition evolve in a different way.
Well, and in my experience, we all have a mind, we all have a body, we all have a heart. So having access to all three is useful. However, when I start with people, I just say, you probably have an experience of all of these, because what I find quite frequently is people go, well, two of those kind of describe me. And I say, just choose the one that feels the most comfortable and we'll start there. And then when people start to develop their intuition, we just start with that one. So for example, I'm a mind intuitive, which means I'm mentally oriented. So it means when I connect, the thing I love to do is to share ideas and wisdom. Like I will have a conversation about anything to connect with people on that level mentally. And then that's actually what I'm picking up from people intuitively. Like my brain works strategically. My intuition works strategically. I can kind of see, that's why I work with executives. I can see what's happening in market trends. I can understand when you put me with a leadership group, I can see where the leadership group, where communication is actually broken down, because I can perceive it. That's how I'm mentally oriented. And then there are heart intuitives like my husband. Heart intuitives primarily, right? Because we're all of these things, but heart intuitives primarily are oriented emotionally, meaning how they like to connect is a deep understanding of their own emotion and like feeling and or sharing, tapping into others' emotion. What they want is like that. Some people call it like that moment of oneness that comes from empathizing or sympathy or generosity of spirit. That's heart intuitives. And so when they use their intuition, you can send them into a room and they can tell you what the mood of the room is like that. I mean, my husband for a living is a big event and a festival planner. And so when he's on the ground, I've watched him do it. When he's on the ground at a festival and there's like 30,000 people, he's kind of well known for there not being fights at his events, because it's almost like I say what he's doing is he's like got his arms around the whole thing energetically and he's feeling what's happening. And so he's anticipating stuff, which is part of his gift, right? He can feel almost like the emotion of the event. And then there are body intuitives, and body intuitives are oriented physically. So what their desire for connection is to experience. So if you find a body intuitive with other people, those people have to be really like in their body, healthy people, because body intuitives don't love people as a general rule. They find them very overwhelming. So body intuitives, you're going to be more likely to find them in nature somewhere or with animals. They can communicate with animals very easily. They read animals because animals don't have the amount of edifice that we do. Like we have very complex ways of pretending that we're okay when we're not. Body intuitives see through that because that's how their orientation works. So that's why they like being around animals, because animals don't lie. If they're hurt, they're crying. And if they're tired, they're sleeping. And if they're excited, they're wagging their tail. Like, what's going on with them. So that's body intuitives are great with animals that way. So once you know how you're oriented, which is what the test tells you, then you look at what your translation is, and then that you can see how they fit together. Mm-hmm. And then it's actually pretty simple from there to practice noticing when your intuition is communicating to you.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Of course. So mostly and again, it depends on how yours works, but I'll use mine as an example. So I see and hear things. So I would be with people in college before I really understood it was my intuition communicating to me. And it felt like there was more than what they were saying. So I felt a little bit kind of schizophrenic because I was like thinking people were lying to me all the time. I was like, I swear they're lying, because it did not feel like, to me in my listening, not how it felt, right? Because I'm not a feeler, but how it listened, how I heard it was that there was things they were not telling me. And so I filled in the blanks. That was the unhealthy part of my brain that needed some healing, right? Like, people don't like me. And so I went through pretty large hoops and energy to have people like me, which I, of course, was very good at as an intuitive. But I could literally hear and sense that there was something else going on. And now that I know I'm a mind intuitive who hears, I know that when I meet people for the very, very first time, I will notice things pop in my head. Like, I don't like sports, by the way. I like to play them, but I don't really watch them. But when I meet people for the very first time, what will pop in my head is what to bring up in conversation so I can have that connection with them. Because I love connecting to people about the things that matter to them. I'll like ask them about, sports or something, and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, isn't that an amazing game?" And I was like, "Well, I didn't really watch it, but my brother." I mean, and that's how my intuition works, because I love connecting to people in that way. So my husband, I'll give you an example of him. He is a heart intuitive who feels and knows. So the other day, we were trying to make a decision about travel. We're going on a trip for our 10th wedding anniversary, and we could not figure out where we wanted to start the trip. And every time I talked about flying into Portland, like something about it didn't feel right to him. He was just like, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel right. And I was like, okay, well, do you know what feels right instead? Because I'm a mind intuitive, like, tell me the answer instead. But he was like, no, he's like, just give me a moment. And he was like, what about going into Portland? He goes, it doesn't feel right. He goes, what about Boston? And I was like, oh, that sounds like fun. And he's like, oh, my body's relaxing. That's the answer. So for him, that like the emotional connection, for whatever reason for him, right? The emotional connection of Boston, that's the thing that felt right to him. And his body relaxed when he switched the answer. Does that make sense? So depending on how our intuition works, we're all built a little bit differently. And I could give hundreds of examples, because clients knock my socks off when they tell me stories of using their intuition after they've learned it. And I'm just always like, that is the coolest story, because they use it in all different arenas.
Mm-hmm. So is that why you're more interested in teaching now than actually giving the sessions?
I think probably, and this will make sense to you, Deb, I think, which is one-to-one, I can only help so many people. And I've reached kind of like, I'm not quite there, but I'm close to like what my max is of the number of people I can help one-to-one. And if I said what my big vision is of the world, it's a world in which people are tapped into their intuition. Because when people are living intuitively, they are naturally more kind, more present, and more loving. Because when we live intuitively, that's what we're tapped into. And so if I want a world that has access to that, I'm going to have to change the narrative. And to change the narrative is going to require reaching way more people. And I know teaching is access to that. So while I still work with people one-on-one, and I use my intuition to help people, because that's fun. I've been doing that for 26 years. It's really fun and I'm really good at it. The thing I really love doing is helping other people learn how to use their intuition to, transform their life, but also be in alignment with what matters to them. I work with business leaders who are the kind of people who want to win for the right reasons in the right way, but market is hard. If you want to grow a business successfully, means treating your people really, really well. That's not really the design of business, like big business. That's not the design of it. The design of it is those are the people in the machinery that makes the thing go. And these are people who don't want to do that. So they need access to their intuition to be able to continue to grow a business successfully in alignment with their values, which is taking care of people. So to me, when I teach people, it then has huge impact. One of the business leaders I work with has 1,000 employees. So when I positively impact her, that affects 1,000 people. And then each one of those people have family members and it impacts them, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like that on and on. So that's part of the reason why I'm more focused on teaching. And also I'm writing a book. The book summary is almost done. And then that goes to my agent, who's going to start looking for a publisher, which is really exciting. But that book is kind of it's called The Intuitive Blueprint. It's a book about what I've been teaching for the last 10 years so that a broader number of people would never have to find me, but could read this book and learn how to use their intuition. That's really why I'm on the planet this time around anyway.
Yeah, I love it. It's, you can only do one at a time. That's what I notice with psychotherapy. It's one at a time. And that's why I love teaching the groups. I actually have a mindful group starting on Thursday night. One spot available if anybody's watching, wants to join in. Hey, Mark, hey, Dave, what are we seeing in here? There's writing. I don't have my glasses on. Is there some comments that we should be sharing before we conclude?
My question would be about, is there something higher than intuition from your perspective in the communication realm? That's
a super fascinating question. I I think to answer that, I have to say this, which is, I think intuition is just a tool. So obviously people could use intuition in a way, and we've seen people do this. Like we watch people climb, to a high level of power, probably using their intuition, like using their ability to read people really accurately and situations really accurately, and, successfully predict and whatever. So obviously you could use intuition because it's a tool in a way that's not positive. So I would have to say that, because I feel like people do ask me that. Do people use intuition in a way that's not positive? Of course, because like any other tool. But for me, where I think like genuine intuition comes from is that higher self, is that consciousness. What always pops in my brain is Deepak Chopra was talking about like human consciousness. And I know he took this from somebody else and I can't remember who it is, so I apologize for not quoting accurately, but he talks about in his book, most recent one, Metahuman, he says that the human consciousness is like, two birds in the tree, and one is eating the fruit and one is observing the bird eating the fruit. And the bird eating the fruit is our mind, right? It's like our brain and our, like all of those processes. And it's our instinct, the part of ourselves that scans the environment for threat. But our intuition is the observer. And so to me, intuition is really like observes without agenda, because it responds to us. So if you wanted to use intuition, like I was telling this story to a client the other day, because she said, when's the time you used intuition that you feel a little guilty about? And which was like such an insightful question, right? And I said, I was one time stuck in Europe and I didn't have enough money for the train to get where I needed to go. And so I used intuition to know which train I could take that they wouldn't check tickets.
Whoa.
And because it's intuition can tell you what's true. And I got on the train. I sat in the back because that was the train car it told me to sit in. I sat in a particular spot far to the back. And some people could hear this and go, oh, well, that's like kind of obvious. Like someone's not going to walk all the way to the back of the train. But I've been on trains in Europe where they do that. So this was the one they told me to go on. There were 3 trains. I took the 3rd train, very last. The guy checking tickets came into the car and then like went through the first like 10 seats. And I was like in the 15th seat, and a thing came on where he had to go back to the front of the train, and he turned around and didn't check my ticket. So can you use intuition for things that are maybe not super integrity? Yes, of course. And I truly believe that intuition comes from that higher place. It is observing all things. So you can use it practically, or the way I like to use it, which is for my spiritual path. So it's however you want to use it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's cool.
Great question.
You've been a wonderful guest tonight. I really appreciate your insights, your experience, and your expertise. And thank you so much for the gift to everybody. It's a beautiful gift to share, and I hope everyone has a chance to go and check out the intuitive
Blueprint test.
Blueprint. It's beautiful.
Thank you. I hope so. And just so people know, if they take the test, there's a video and then a whole bunch of information that's free. So even if you never work with me, taking that test will provide some help in developing your intuition.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you haven't said this evening? 1 minute that you'd like to share, Shoshanna?
Yeah, the thing that is coming to me to say is that the reminder that each of us are born with this gift to be connected. And whether you believe that connection is to, Mother Earth, Father Sky, or you believe that connection is to the goddess, or that connection is to God, or whatever your belief is, we're born with that connection. If you've ever read Chicken Soup for the Soul and babies talking about seeing angels and all that kind of stuff, we know we're born with this ability to connect. So to me, this is not about people learning to do something that they don't know how to do. This is about remembering. And so it's about removing the barriers you have to remembering who you really are and this natural ability we have. So I just want to, I always want to say that source, God, whatever, universe, whatever it is intended, it gave us this ability to do this so that we could be on the path to fulfilling why we're here on the planet. So whatever that is for you and however your spiritual pathway is, just honor that you are already connected. You may just not know that you are. So, you're the best person to know what works for you. And when you're connected, you can listen and hear and trust. So I hope that that piece rests in people's hearts and they get that they're already connected.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Such a valuable lesson, last words. Thank you so much for being on the show this evening. I really appreciate you taking your time. I know you're very busy joining us. And thank you to the people that are watching. Pray love and for your comments. We always appreciate that. Dave, thank you so much. And Shoshanna, just stick around and I'll meet you in the back room.
I have a feeling that this one will be shared by many of our guests today to all of their friends and family too. So
I hope so.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Love is